Welcome to The Language, your comprehensible input for learners. Before we begin, I want to be clear, this debate is not meant to create controversy. This is for educational purposes, and we're holding this discussion in English to give you listeners the opportunity to learn the language through genuinely engaging content. We're talking about Arc Raiders, a game that has stirred up strong opinions. Our views might get heated, but this is a friendly discussion. Shall we get started?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
So Arc Raiders, what a launch, right? 350,000 concurrent players on Steam, 89% positive reviews. I mean, huge numbers. But
Yeah, there's this massive controversy.
yeah, the genre change, the whole PvE, PvDE thing.
Exactly. That's what we need to talk about. You know, the elephant in the room.
Finally. Yeah, that's where the real debate is. Okay, so our focus today is centered squarely on the creative and, well, commercial legitimacy of Embark Studios' big genre pivot. Specifically, was this drastic shift of Arc Raiders from its original co-op PvE vision, player versus environment, just fighting the computer, to the final PvPvE extraction shooter format, which brings in player versus player. Was that a necessary act of self-preservation, maybe even commercial brilliance, or was it a cynical betrayal of the original vision, just sacrificing uniqueness for, market saturation? I'm going to argue that, well, the pivot was a practical necessity that led to undeniable success.
See, I come at it from a different way. While the initial market validation is, it's evident, I view this pivot as a fundamental creative compromise. The original concept, the one they announced back in 2021, it promised something distinctive, right? A free-to-play, purely cooperative experience, fighting these huge robot machines, the ARC. And that vision, it cultivated a specific, devoted, albeit maybe phantom audience, who were just desperate for a high-quality co-op title. Abandoning that unique position after years of development just to jump into the already overcrowded extraction shooter genre, well, in my estimation, that was a display of, frankly, creative cowardice and a profound alienation of their earliest supporters.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it differently. The success we're seeing now, it wasn't a fluke. It was the direct result of some difficult, yes, but ultimately practical decision-making. Embark CEO Patrick Soderlund, he justified the change by stating pretty unambiguously that the original PvE formula, after 6 months of internal testing, well, quote, was not fun, right? This wasn't just a minor tweak, it was a conceptual failure they caught early enough to salvage. And given the studio's deep expertise, their DNA, as they say, in highly refined competitive gameplay from their Battlefield lineage, they successfully transformed what could have been a commercially catastrophic concept into a critical triumph. The hard data, that 89% positive Steam rating, the huge concurrent player count, that validates the pivot. It confirms the current PvPvE version engages players, where the previous one, by their own admission, just failed to hold interest.
But not fun after only 6 months of testing? Wait, are you serious? That suggests a fundamental flaw, maybe, in the project management or the conceptual design itself if a unique co-op experience had to be completely abandoned so swiftly. The 5-year timeline, right, between announcement and the final release, that underscores the commitment the community expected. Remember what they promised in 2021, a free-to-play co-op game fighting robots. You talk about commercial necessity, but you ignore the immense, proven demand for high-quality, unique, cooperative PvE experiences. Just look at the gaming landscape, the astronomical success of titles like Deep Rock Galactic and Helldivers 2. It proves this is an underserved market ready to embrace excellence. Hello? People love co-op PvE. Embark forfeited the chance to be the definitive robot co-op game to become, frankly, just another extraction shooter. How many do we need? Tarkov, Hunt, Cycle, Marauders, DMZ, how many? Extraction shooters are everywhere.
Okay, hold on. I must respectfully challenge that sort of romanticization of the pre-pivot vision. While I agree the sentiment was appealing, The promise is irrelevant if the core gameplay loop fails to sustain itself, especially for a live service title. The developers confirmed the core experience was not fun. If a studio releases a title they know is fundamentally boring, that kills their reputation and their future viability much more definitively than any pivot ever could. Releasing a boring game that kills the studio? That would be stupid. The pivot wasn't a betrayal. It was, arguably, an act of integrity to deliver a working game. You're basically asking them to pursue a failed promise.
Flawed, perhaps, but the solution didn't have to be jumping into a genre that fundamentally changes the player mindset. Many of us saw a collaborative, maybe even a relaxing experience. There's a difference between necessary challenge and unnecessary stress. We wanted to fight robots, enjoy deep progression with friends. We didn't want to constantly look over our shoulder and potentially get killed on sight, KOS, by some hostile human player. That move to integrate PvP inherently attracts toxicity, KOS, griefing. It undermines the very cooperative spirit the game tries to engineer. We want to relax with friends, fight robots, not get backstabbed.
I see why you feel that way about the shift in tone. I do. But that competitive tension, that is precisely what elevates the game. It provides long-term dynamic interest. That unpredictability is the engine of emergent gameplay, which is, let's be honest, far superior to just programmed AI encounters. Let's look again at the market validation. 350,000 concurrent players. Are you serious? And that remarkable 89% positive user score. These figures do not lie. They prove the team ultimately got it right. The PvPvE framework facilitates those unique stories, the spontaneous standoffs, the proximity chat negotiations, those fleeting alliances. Human elements that no AI, not the matriarch or any other program threat, could ever truly match. This dynamic is why reviewers often call it an anti-Tarkov. That is unique.
Stories that 350,000 players are enjoying, yes, but those are 350,000 who didn't get what they waited 5 years for. They don't know what they missed. Initial market success is often a honeymoon phase, come on. It does not justify abandoning the original creative audience who wanted that relaxing progression against challenging AI. The introduction of highly efficient human predators fundamentally penalizes players who only have, say, 20 or 30 minutes to play. Losing a loadout filled with hard-earned gear because some highly motivated, often toxic player decides to grief, that undermines meaningful progress and creates enormous friction for the casual player. This could have been Deep Rock but robots, unique.
Though I would frame the friction differently. The game is specifically engineered to mitigate that sense of loss. You mentioned toxicity, right? But the design actually counteracts it actively. They provide safety nets, free starter loadouts, progression cushions where you banked earned XP and skill points even on failed extracts, and a mechanism to secure one precious item regardless of death. The entire extraction system is streamlined to reduce that punishing re-entry friction that plagues the traditional hardcore extraction genre. This makes the game far more forgiving and accessible than you are giving it credit for. It's not like Tarkov where you lose everything.
That structural mitigation slapped on top of a conceptual failure. I reiterate, the market saturation. Tarkov, Hunt, Cycle, Marauders, DMZ, the list of extraction heavy hitters is long and well established. How many must we endure? Embark followed a trend. They followed it out of market fear. It was cowardly. The original PvE focus could have made it genuinely unique. A Deep Rock but robots, hello? The new focus just makes it another entry in a crowded competitive field.
I'm just not convinced by that line of reasoning because you are ignoring the precise accessibility features that make the game unique within that crowded field. It's not just the safety nets I mentioned. The game's third-person perspective immediately differentiates it and broadens its appeal far beyond the niche, hardcore first-person communities you list. Furthermore, the matchmaking system prioritizes solo players against other solos, and the proximity chat, it often facilitates a pro-social dynamic because the giant ARC machines are the unifying threat creating collaboration, even if it's temporary. They didn't just copy a trend, they adapted it, innovated within it, and made the extraction genre accessible. That is, by definition, carving a unique space. The anti-Tarkov idea is unique.
Wait. They could have fostered that exact same collaborative culture against high-level, unique, challenging AI threats in a pure PvE setting. In fact, that's what the original concept was supposed to deliver. The fear that the original concept was not fun suggests maybe a failure to design meaningful PvE encounters, not a failure of the PvE genre itself. There's a difference between challenge and stress. AI could be challenging, progression could be deep, but it could still be relaxing, not stressful.
And my position is that their internal testing definitively proved that the concept, as executed by their team, lacks the necessary engagement loop to survive in the long term. They chose to pivot into a format where their core expertise actually lay, maximizing the probability of commercial success, rather than clinging to a concept they knew was flawed. That's intelligent game development, not cowardice. Releasing a boring game that kills a studio? That's stupid.
Okay. Regardless of our fundamental disagreement over the philosophical integrity, let's call it, of the pivot, we have to acknowledge that Embark Studios executed the game they did release with remarkable technical polish.
Absolutely. No question. The tight controls, the satisfying gunplay, the incredible responsiveness, and yeah, the world-class sound design really sells the atmosphere of that Rust Belt setting. It's a mechanically superb title.
The core is genuinely good. That's precisely why it hurts so much. We could have had this technical quality, this polish, applied to a truly unique, underserved PvE experience. That's the potential we lost.
Look, my final position is that the market validation, the 350,000 players, the 89% positive reception, it just proves the pivot was the right path. The unique social dynamics, the emergent gameplay facilitated by the PvPvE structure, that makes this game special and establishes it successfully as an anti-Tarkov. It is definitively better to have a successful pivot than to commit to a failed promise that would have been a disaster.
And my position remains that commercial success, however undeniable right now, does not justify abandoning 5 years of creative vision for a truly underserved PvE market. The game, despite its technical polish, is still fundamentally another extraction shooter that adopted a known trend rather than carved its own truly unique space. They followed the trend. I question the long-term sustainability once this honeymoon phase ends and the inherent stresses of the PvP element start to potentially alienate the broader audience they've captured. The unique vision was abandoned, maybe out of fear, maybe lack of execution, but it was abandoned.
This discussion really it highlights the intense tension, doesn't it, between creative vision and market realities in modern live service game development. There really are no easy answers here. We can't know what would have happened with the PvE version.
No, but we know what we lost.
Thank you for listening to The Language Year.
And thanks for caring about games as much as we do.